Okay, so in this video, I'm going to show you how to export that video that you're ready to send out for final mastering, or perhaps maybe you're just in the middle of cutting and you need to get a version posted for your peers to give review and feedback on. It's just that rough cut state that you need to get out for an audition. Regardless of which state it's in, you're still going to export with the same settings that I'll demonstrate here. So using sequence demo as our reference, that can either be active in the project window or it can be activated in the timeline window, and come to File, Export, and the first option, Media. Command M or Control M if you're on a PC is the shortcut for that. The sequence output dialog window opens, and to begin with, this is set to the specs of our sequence. So I typically don't like to say match sequence settings. I'm probably going to want to change some things up, or at least make sure that I'm having total control over the export. So I tend to turn that off. I know that I'm going to go H.264 as my format. We've been working in that format based on a previous video where we made all of our settings. And I know that YouTube and Vimeo, those popular media streaming platforms, they're going to want me to bring that video in order to be the quickest upload and the most efficient, high quality version for their standards. So keep that set to H.264 if it's not already. And for preset, you can choose one of these presets that's already built into Adobe Premiere. You could choose YouTube 1080p HD, which I'm going to do in this case, or perhaps Vimeo HD as well. They have minor, distinctively different characteristics. We can change the file output destination and the name of our export by choosing Output Name, and then a dialog window will open for us to decide where we want to send that file. I'm not going to change that at this time. Please note that even though we've selected H.264 as our format option, the file name is going to end with the MP4 file extension for MPEG-4. This is okay. It's still a QuickTime H.264 video, but it's inside a wrapper of MPEG-4 format. And this is perfectly acceptable by YouTube and Vimeo, and they're actually expecting this type of file to come to them. So don't get caught by the varying distinction if you're familiar with file format extensions here. Make sure to check Export Video and Export Audio if they aren't already checked. To begin with, there's a nice summary here of what we're sending out, but we're still going to manually go through those now. Under the Audio tab, which is currently highlighted, I want to keep audio format set to AAC. And as I scroll down, I just want to make sure my bit rate is set, which right now 320 is a good one. And again, I'm not changing anything. This was what was set with the YouTube HD preference for 1080. So that looks good for now. Now let's go over to the video option. And it's set to 1920 by 1080, which is great. As I scroll down, square pixels looks good. But I want to check this box here, render at maximum depth. And one other thing by default, the YouTube setting, and Vimeo is the same, it's bitrate encoding. This is how much the processor, the graphics processor and the CPU are going to look at your film and compress it, with the goal being lower file size, but as much quality as possible. Now, in order to do that, we can choose variable bitrate to pass in order to give the processors some more time to review the footage and do the best job that it can. This typically doesn't strain the computers that we have available to us, so I recommend using variable bitrate to pass instead of the default single pass. We don't need to change the target bitrate or the max bitrate, and again, these are set for YouTube specifically. I'm going to check use maximum render quality, and now I'm ready to go. If you know your settings, you can choose the Publish tab, and you can scroll down to YouTube or Vimeo. This is just a little further down here. There's Vimeo, and here's YouTube. If you know your login and you're comfortable with the system that you're editing on, you could check this, put in your credentials, your YouTube username and password, and if you fill this out and save it here, you could get Adobe to not only make this file for you, but upload it to your YouTube account for you automatically. We're not going to do that at the moment, but that is available to you under the Publish tab. The difference now is we need to simply choose, do we want to add this to the queue or export it immediately? The difference between the two is that Q will launch Adobe Premiere, or excuse me, Adobe Media Encoder and run the export directly through Media Encoder in the background, giving us Premiere back, and we can continue editing while that's working in the other application, making the export. If we want to just let Premiere do the export for us, we simply choose Export here. So that's the difference between the two. Again, Q being for Adobe Media Encoder to do the encoding, or Export to let Premiere do it right here. But we can't continue working if we're letting Premiere do it. I also skipped over here. You can choose sequence in to out if you did leave markers on, or just say entire sequence to be safe. And there you go. Premiere is just going to take the whole sequence no matter what and give you in to out, top to bottom, what you have in that sequence. Lastly, you can leave this set to scale to fit. I never would change that before going to YouTube for an export like this. So that will handle your export and get this ready for you. It will export to your desktop, or if you did use the publish settings, it will export directly to that platform for you. If you need to change where the export's going to a thumb drive, for example, or another partition of a hard drive, you can change that through output name here. Map where you want it to go, give it a new file name, and then choose whichever export option you wish to use.